Welcome back, everybody. It's Joseph here with Penny Dreadful City of Angels, Episode 7, Discussion and Review. We open up the episode with Maria on her way to work. She's in the bus resting when something catches her attention. It's none other than Magda, who sees Maria's troubles, family troubles, and wants her to go to the dark side and disavow anything to do with her worshipping of Santa Muerte. We then catch up with Detective Vega, still distraught over forcing Diego to confess for the murder of Officer Riley, knowing that his brother Mateo killed Officer Riley. Later that same day, Detective Vega meets up with Sister Molly in what's supposed to be a celebratory meeting. But as we are well aware of, Detective Vega is clearly conflicted, not only because he's involved with a politically charged and racist police department, but he just framed Diego for the murder of Officer Riley. And he's also dealing with a compromised relationship with Sister Molly, who is currently a suspect in the Hazlitt murder case. And of course, his emotions get the best of him as Sister Molly refers to the newspaper article and the picture of Diego, who she describes as a Mexican boy. And he just erupts in anger and tells him he's not a Mexican boy, he's a Chicano. And this alludes to that someone who is of Latin descent or Mexican descent in this case is not considered an American, regardless if he was born in this country or not. They keep referring to him as a Mexican. And of course, Sister Molly tells him, why do you mean nothing by it? So once he calms down and they start talking about their personal relationship, she starts to get very emotional and tells Detective Vega how much she loves him. And of course, this is after Sister Molly's mother reprimanded her for even seeing Detective Vega. Meanwhile, in Nazi land, the Nazi operatives are applying pressure to Brian, the Caltech student, who they're asking him to build a engine for their new rocket. Obviously, it's a rocket of mass destruction. And they're pitching him on the idea of this is for the betterment of the United States and that Hitler personally will be pleased by Brian if he continues his work and successfully builds this rocket ship. And as we're well aware that Detective Mitchener had warned Brian to stay away from the Nazi operatives, and he agreed to, but obviously he is not. And Detective Mitchener is on the ball and is compiling his evidence against the Nazis and against Brian. Now we come to Peter Kraft, who successfully sent his wife to the sanitarium so that he can bring in Elsa and make her the new wife. And he's trying to explain this to his son, Tommy. And of course, Tommy's upset and he has a hard time trying to control Tommy's emotions. And Maria steps in. And if you haven't realized that up to this point, Maria not only is Detective Vega's mother, but she's the maid of the Nazi Peter Kraft. We then cut to Elsa and her demon seed, Frank, moving into the Peter Kraft home. And Frank, who has his eye on Tommy, and you got to remember that Frank is also the demon. So it's inevitable that Elsa, once portrayed herself as hopeless and mild-tempered, starts to be a little bit more aggressive and starts off nice with Maria. But eventually, in this conversation, she tells her that it'd be better if that she moves out of the house and moves her room and her items into the garage. And that's just a way of Elsa trying to assert not only her authority, but actually to get her claws deeper into Peter Craft. Now we come to one of my favorite scenes in episode 7. That's when Beverly, a member of the city council and the arch nemesis of Councilman Townsend, confronting his assistant Alex. And they get into a squabble not only about the current state of affairs in the city council, and Alex, who we know is also the demon Magda in disguise, begins a series of tirades and innuendos and makes these political references about Roosevelt, and that Roosevelt only cares about the Jews, the blacks, and anybody of color. And very reminiscent of what's going on today. She goes on to tell Beverly that she represents the angry men and women that Roosevelt let down by including all these minorities and all these blacks, all these Jews, all these Spics and Mexicans, and incorporating them into the fabric of America. And getting back to Detective Mitchner, what we see here is we have Detective Vega being incorporated into Detective Mitchner's operation of surveillance over the Nazis and Brian, and compiling all this data and sharing it with him. And essentially, Detective Vega becomes another member of the Nazi hunters with Detective Mitchner. They acquire additional intel where the Nazis are having this swanky dinner, and they're recruiting additional members of the community. And lo and behold, Sister Molly's mother, the dragon lady herself, Adelaide, walks in to meet with the Nazis, as well as Alex and Councilman Townsend with members of the city council. So as we arrive towards the end of the episode, we see Maria distraught and upset about what has happened to her family. She feels her whole family's unraveling, and she starts to remember the good times that wasn't so long ago. A time when they were still a very tight, close family unit. And she longs for that. And in her longing, she decides to go and pray. And as we all know, that she chooses to pray to Santa Muerte. And while in deep prayer, Santa Muerte shows up and basically tells Maria, "Why do you keep bothering me?" Maria becomes upset with Santa Muerte as she feels rejected by Santa Muerte, but Santa Muerte explains to her that it's not about her. And in the middle of their argument, Magda shows up. And if you remember in the beginning of the episode, Magda has her eyes on Maria because she's trying to manipulate Maria to pull her away from Santa Muerte. And if you really think about it, Magda is hurt that Santa Muerte rejected the dark side from Magda. And she's really all about getting back to Santa Muerte to make her sister suffer. And this becomes quite evident when Magda baits her sister and tells her, "Here is my victory, one single tear or an ocean of them. Weep, sister, weep in darkness and forever." And of course, Magda, trying to seize on this opportunity, turns back to Maria and tells her how weak Santa Muerte is and that she should convert and go to the dark side with Magda. But Maria resists and just goes off on Magda and just starts wailing into her. And here I'll show you a few of the things that Maria had to say to Magda. "We are kings and queens, and the blood of the Aztecs runs through us. The soldiers of the revolution walk beside us, and I will fight till the end of days. I banish you from this place. And that concludes episode 70 of Penny Dreadful's City of Angels. And my review is simply this: you have great performances. This episode 7 solidified and tied up all the loose ends. We see Magda really is hearkening for the love of her sister. And we see that Townsend and Alex are all conspiring in this evil plot with the Nazis to condemn every minority, specifically in this case, the Mexican American community. They want to drive them out of the United States along with the blacks and the Jews, and will use every means necessary to do so. So moving forward, we're obviously going to see the storyline continue where Detective Vega and Detective Mitchner are actually hunting down the Nazis, but they also have to deal with the racial and prejudicial LAPD police force. So stay tuned for episode 8. I guarantee it'll be jam-packed with action, plot twists, and Magda showing her 8 evil deeds. And one last thing, don't forget to like and subscribe and keep it here on Zenny62.